I started the job at the Electronic Studio of Radio Belgrade in 2016. I was invited to be composer in residence and head of the studio. And at that time, the studio was rather inactive for some 10 years. I would say from maybe early 90s throughout 2000s. There was a really lack of activities in the studio that involved other artists. So when I arrived at this place and to this job in 2016, there was more or less no programs at the studio like the ones that we have nowadays. First thing to do for me as I started my new job was to make the studio fully functional, or to think of the functionality that I want to have in this new reopened electronic studio. So my idea was to kind of go back to the setting that we had when the studio was founded in late 1960s and beginning of 1970s, and to have this instrument here, EMS Synthi 100, as the kind of main thing around which the programs in the studio would be based. I was really happy to have the support of the team from the Radio Belgrade 3. So with their support, I managed to, first of all, to restore the functionality of the studio, and then to establish the programs that we have nowadays. These programs include residencies for both local and international artists, some educational programs, and then there is plenty of activities that relate to the content that we have in our studio that has been documented since its foundation, since the early 70s, and that relates to our archive. From 2018 up until now, we had all these programs that were running like successively. So artist residencies, educational programs, as well as the programs that relate to our archive. When it comes to artist residencies at the Electronic Studio of Radio Belgrade, it was equally important to establish time and space for both local and international artists to work here. In that sense, for the local artists for those who maybe had a little less professional experience in the sphere of electronic music, we organized workshops and courses, which was difficult to do for international artists. Therefore, international artists that we invited were the ones who already had some kind of experience of working with modular synthesizers, such as this one. I think we came up with an very interesting format that hasn't been present so much, which is a live radio broadcast, where we use this instrument, Synthi 100, in live performance. Why this is interesting particularly is because the instrument itself was built to be more of a workstation at the time when it was built, so in the early 1970s. And it wasn't really a plan to be used in live performance so much. So I think it was a challenge for the artists who were doing the residencies here to try using this instrument in a little bit different way, and a little bit more to put it in the context of today's electronic music and how we approach it. With this job at the Electronic Studio, being both composer in residence and head of the studio, conceptualizing the programs that we have in the studio nowadays, it was a little bit of a split personality that I had, meaning that at one side there was my approach to the use of this studio as a composer, so in my own work, and there was the other side of me, which I found to be very important, and the purpose of which was to open the way for other artists to come into the studio, to use the setup that we have, and to make their own works. I actually found that these two sort of a little bit different jobs that I had in one were very complementary and making a very good balance, because as artists and composers we are really focused on our own work to quite a big extent. And I think the ability to share and also to be able to perceive other people's work in many of its aspects and very closely is something that makes a huge difference. So this was my main motive to accept this job and to approach it this enthusiastically as I had throughout these couple of years from 2016 up until 2021. In my own artistic work, I have employed the use of synthi in different ways. I've used some of its sounds for my installations, which isn't, I would say, like the default purpose of this instrument. But on the other hand, I used it, as most of the artists who were doing the residencies here, to develop live performance. But also something that was also maybe more relates to the times when the studio was founded in 1970s and 80s, and when it was working full force. I was using the materials made on synthi to produce radiophonic works. And these were my main kind of applications of the sound of EMS Synthi 100 in my own work. As I'm leaving Electronic Studio this month in 2021 for a new job that I will have in Switzerland, I feel very happy about what we have achieved so far. And I have to say we, because it's a really joint effort of my colleagues and actually all the people and artists who were coming to the residencies and who were taking part in the program. So I'm very happy about what we have done so far. And I hope that I succeeded to establish a certain structure that could be followed in the years to come in terms of the educational programs and workshops, also guest lectures that we had in our studio, but also artistic residencies for both local and international artists. I hope that the Electronic Studio of Radio Belgrade will continue with these programs in the future as well, and that I'll be coming here as a guest artist to produce some of my works as well.